has changed a little bit. Roy and I are joined by Michelle Cleary, and I'll introduce both of those folks in some period of time. But everybody, you probably know Mr. Roy Anderson. He is a lecturer at the Northeastern University up in Boston. And he is also a procurement practitioner extraordinaire with quite a bit of experience in procurement in pharma and financial services. We are being joined today by Michelle Cleary, who is the freshly minted procurement director at Warner Music Group. And we thought it would be very interesting to have Michelle join us, as she is now making friends at Warner Music Group and creating alliances with internal stakeholders. And it was very suitable for our podcast today, which is to talk about be a friend to get a friend, how to build strategic stakeholder relationships in procurement. And Maya, if we can progress to the next slide. So today we're going to talk about how you can achieve these objectives by having actionable tactics. And, essentially procurement needs to come in and earn the trust of stakeholders and move sort of from the policing function to becoming a strategic partner, which I think is very, very important, not to bring guns blazing into procurement as you start to build relationships and so on. So I'm very interested to learn sort of from Roy what he has found effective in the past, and then also talking to Michelle about how we are thinking about doing this in her new role. As always, I would love to get your questions in the chat and also learn where you guys are calling in from today. So with that, let's jump right into it to the next slide. So why do relationships matter so much? And the problem basically is if people don't trust you, people won't engage you, right? So, essentially what we want to do is we want to shift from enforcement to enablement. And we also want to make sure that people see procurement's value beyond savings and so on. So essentially what we want to do is we want to be part of, the larger team of procurement, so that we are invited into the fold, so to speak, rather than sort of sitting at the end of a process and then being the traffic cop as things come in. So let's move on to the first question. So, Roy, in your point of view, what is the biggest mistake procurement can do as we're trying to get in there and building new relationships?
I'll start with our history of these episodes. We've talked about the elimination of transactional work and the elimination of being the individual that goes, oh, you have to use procurement, or best practices use procurement. And we go in there saying you must do this type of process, when in actuality, what we need to do is bring talent to bring in talent as appropriate, because most importantly to our value proposition is our internal customers realize that we actually have the skill sets that are going to make it easier for them to get their goals accomplished. So the mistake number one is trying to be that stop, you have to use us, versus I have talent, I'm bringing in new talent, and then I'm going to work with you to hit your goals.
All right. Michelle, how does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I find that the most successful procurement folks are those that can build strong relationships. So I think the biggest mistake that some people make is, you said it before, sort of coming in guns blazing or like the bull in the china shop. I think you have to build the relationships, understand the landscape and the ecosystem, and then start coming with your ideas, instead of coming in, on day 1, day 5 with all of these changes that you want to make. You're just going to immediately lose your audience.
Yep, some truth to that. One thing I want to add is a lot of times, especially as you're starting out in a new procurement function, or maybe you're building a procurement function for the first time, is, it sounds cheesy, right? But you want to listen more than you talk, and you want to figure out what the pain points are and what the priorities are, rather than sort of coming with a solution in mind, right? Some people, this might shock some viewers here today, but I found a lot of times when you kind of walk in assuming that you know the answer, you're very often wrong. And
Yes.
I was coaching a freshly minted chief procurement officer not that long ago, and I was advising him, these people might not care about procurement savings. Maybe they just want the process to be better. Maybe they just want the to risk to be reduced or have better governance and so on, right? And those are very different goals and tactics that need to be applied. So I think the cheesy adage is, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them accordingly, right?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, and I've also noticed that there are times when your internal customer is just trying to use you to cover their historical errors. So I say stop. I'm like, hey, you want to go buy something from that supplier and get the invoice in, that's fine. But that process is all on you. I'm good, that's fine. I'm going to be working towards a successful long-term solution. That means I'm going to do the sourcing. I'm going to do the negotiation and contracting in support of your long-term goals. And we will together get to a more informed, auditable, quality process. And I'm not going to be your cover-up artist at the end of this, because at the end, when we look at the results that you work with me, I know are going to be much better than the results that you had on your own. So I'm not going to be your go-to guy to fix those problems. I'm going to be your future success story.
I like it. Moving on to the next question. So how do we get into that early engagement phase? What are some of the tactics that you found works, and what are some of the tactics you found does not work at all?
All right. Go ahead, Michelle.
Go ahead. Oh, no. Okay. So like I said, I approach procurement from a relational perspective. I feel like I have to earn my seat at the table with my stakeholders. So I ask to be invited to their weekly team meetings, or if it's budget season, please include me as a fly on the wall to start with, an observer. I'm trying to understand the dynamics of the team, what the needs are, maybe if it's marketing, understanding what the brands are trying to achieve. Listen first and absorb the information. Like, that is so valuable, because it shows the teams that you're trying to understand their dynamic and what their core needs are, versus just coming in with your ideas. And then that just really organically leads to you being consulted and pulled in earlier, because you're viewed as an extension of their team, not as this person in a foreign department that they don't understand.
One of the things that I found important, and we talked about this earlier, is one, you got to stop being that transactional person. That work has to be done, but it does not have to be done by you. That means the technology should do that tactical suppliers work, and hopefully with the right technology in place, your internal customers are doing that tactical work, so that you freed up your entire organization. Now with AI, that is even more dramatic, that you can eliminate all of that work and then start bringing value to your internal customers. So one, you have to have the time to invest in those internal customers, not 1 month before they buy it, not even 6 months. Every category is different, so I'm just doing an average, but potentially 2 years before they have the requirement. They're getting activity and saying, hey, we're thinking of doing this, and it's going to come up, and you're in June, and your budget year starts in January. You have to start feeding these internal customers contracted suppliers that have more innovation, greater competency and capability. They have value add, and that you have the time to explain and develop that relationship with the internal customers, so that when they make the budgeting decision, which frequently includes the pricing from the supplier, it's our supplier that they're going forward with. So therefore, when they need to buy it, we've already got the contract in place. We already have the terms and conditions covered. Now it's about optimizing that supplier relationship. So I'm not saying everything's going to be 2 years out. Some things are going to be 3 months out, 6 months out, but don't think it's going to be a week or two before they buy it. It's back when they're doing the project, and that's when you need to have the time to support them.
I also, it's a bit of an aside, but I also feel that to the extent to which procurement can provide value beyond the transaction. So, for example, coming proactively to your senior stakeholders and saying, look, here's how many projects you did last year. Here's how many contracts that are coming up for renewal next year, and sort of bringing it to them so that they don't have this fever pitch one day of like, oh, I need to renew this contract and go off and do it, or whatever the case may be, right? So I think certainly looking backwards to predict the future about contract repository, for example, or category reviews, that's good stuff to bring in, as well as being part of their budgeting process as they're kind of going through it, right? And I think you probably need both to be fully functional in that space. All right. What is, Maya, can you flip to the next page, please? So what does it look like when you have built that rapport with your stakeholder, and what is different?
I can start with this one. So, I mean, I think for me, perfect world is where I am seen as an extension of their team and I'm just naturally involved in things. I'm not having to ask anymore. I'm truly embedded within the teams and I'm consulted, and 2 years honestly sounds like a dream to be looped in that early. I'm used to dealing with 3 days. So I would love 2 years, but having that proactivity, and I think also having stakeholders that truly understand my function in procurement and how I'm helping to provide value. I've often joked that I want to start a side business of procurement t-shirts, and I think one of them would be "We're more than savings." The other would be early involvement. But I think like having stakeholders that truly understand that value of procurement, that's a perfect world and helps you with that day-to-day relationship just to be very buttoned up and strong.
Yeah, I found that if my team, when I look at developing the goals with my team comes forward and says, okay, here are my 2 key or 3 or 5 key internal customers. Here are their goals. Mm-hmm. Now, how do I build my goals out so that I enhance and match the pace, the tenor, the need of those internal customers that I can bring suppliers? So when my internal team is matching their goals, and therefore when I go back to them for my weekly or monthly status, more monthly than anything else, I said, here's where my team is supporting specifically your expectations and your goals. And that would be, quality, service, delivery, but more importantly, the innovation. And what I find just really takes off is that when we are bringing in suppliers that make my internal customers not only more innovative, but not only hit their goal, but surpass their goal. And then I think I told you this before, Anders, the first person I've ever hired into any new procurement organization is a marketing person. Because we're doing hundreds of sourcing events. That means hundreds of stories around how we're changing behavior, changing value. And we have to do a much better job marketing that result, whether it's in social media posts or text posts or reporting or any of those, that the people realize, and that we highlight those that are working with us and tell the rest of the organization, how good is Sally, who has worked with us and all of a sudden she's hitting their goals, and Sally's like, yeah, this relationship has been supportive. All of a sudden you start creating a momentum where you don't have to beat people over it. The story comes out because people are talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like if you've reached the point where your stakeholder can come to you and say, I need a tool or I need an agency that can do X, Y, or Z, and they know that you're going to come back and say, I have the perfect partner for you, know exactly who to call. Like that means you've gotten to Xanadu of that procurement stakeholder relationship.
So what I always kind of, the feeling is really good when stakeholders come to you to solve their problems.
Yes.
Right. So that they see procurement as a trusted relationship stakeholder where they can come to you and say, how do I solve this? Or what do you think about the output of XYZ staff member, and so on and so forth, right? Because they realize that it's a joint relationship. And the second thing is when you have other stakeholders going to bat for procurement or being your biggest disciples and walking around saying how they helped you. Right? And I think that's, to me, that's always success, right? I kind of think about when you sort of start that new procurement function, you take over procurement function, is when your staff members are repeating your words, basically saying they got it, they understood what it was supposed to be. That's level one. Level two is when your stakeholders are also saying, the right things in terms of how to engage with suppliers and how to manage suppliers or stakeholders or whatever the case may be. And I think that's, for me, true signs that you sort of reached where you want to go.
Now, there are just a quick note in the fact that it's going to be a two-way street. So we're very dependent on technology, and now we're going to be very, very dependent on an AI implementation strategy and plan, that we have to be able to let the company know how we're using the IT group, the marketing group, the production group, inventory, whatever the areas are, that how they're working with us, and then raise them up whenever possible.
All right. Hey, Maya, can you go to the next slide, please? So the last sort of formal slide here as we get into it. And if there's any questions at all from the group online, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're looking at it. So what KPI or KPIs should procurement measure if they want good internal relationships?
As I mentioned before, my team's goals have to match my internal customers' goals. So therefore, the KPIs have to be directly in relationship to what that internal customer is looking to do. So my story is when I was at Fidelity telling this fund manager that I could save them $1 million, he came back to me, goes, Roy, I make this company $1 million a day. Help me make $2 million. And I'm like, oh, it's not about savings. It's about speed and competency and capability. Well, I want a KPI that shows how we doubled capability or doubled competence in that particular space. And then when I show that KPI, the internal customer goes, right on. That's exactly. Then they know I'm in line. I'm talking their story. I have KPIs that talk their story.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think obviously an obvious KPI is always savings, but I think that comes with the part and parcel of procurement. I just think there's so much other value add things that are really great KPIs, things like supplier relationship management. We did 5 QBRs with our key top spend vendors, and the result was, a better transparent relationship, or maybe we decided that they're not the right partner and we're going RFP. Like I love talking about how procurement has helped to partner to strengthen supplier relationships with stakeholders. And I think it's often overlooked. It can also be sort of some of the boring things where it's like we did a contract review and we found some really unfavorable terms and we made them more favorable to the company. Like it might not be bottom line P&L savings, but at the end of the day, it's a healthier, more favorable contract for the company. So I think there's a lot of different ways outside of just savings that you can measure KPIs.
Yeah, that was that exact scenario is that when you're dealing with legal, of course, we have our internal customer, but they're also dealing with audit and legal and finance and all the other players. So we have to make audit, legal, and finance realize that if we're involved, they're covered, right? The legal team is going to say, hey, I know I'm going to have better terms and conditions if the supply chain team is involved. Audit goes, I know I'm going to have audit clauses and support, and I can do a third-party audit without any concerns of failure because the supply chain team's involved. So I want to make sure that those other partner groups that service the internal customer as well all realize that we're supporting them. Another good example is how many internal customers that are not in IT are all signing up IT deals, and the IT people come running later on and go, whoa, this doesn't fit our stack. What are you talking about? But they know when we're involved, we're going to make sure they get involved appropriately as well. So all the other players got to see us as the way they're going to be able to make sure that their programs are embedded more effectively into the internal customers who have no insight into what finance and legal and audit and IT really want. We bring that to the table.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is like, how have we helped them address and mitigate their pain points? Maybe it's putting more formalized process in place. Maybe it's bringing a tool to the table to help with synergies and efficiencies. But that's another value add KPI that I think leans a lot of value. If I'm able to put in governance or tools that help people do their jobs more effectively and efficiently, that's a huge KPI to measure.
So speaking of which, so one of the things that we often talk about in procurement is to have that whole 360-degree value message, right? So we talked about savings and risk mitigation and how many invoices and how many POs and how many contracts and all that kind of good stuff. How do we feel about Net Promoter Score or customer satisfaction score from the stakeholders? And I worked in some big organizations, right? At once a year, they would send out this customer satisfaction score, and where the people rate HR and facilities and everything. And if you deal with procurement twice a year, and maybe 6 months the last time you dealt with procurement. But how do you feel about a Net Promoter Score that is driven by something that gets sent out immediately after an interaction with procurement?
I mean, I can be the detractor here. I think a Net Promoter Score is a moment in time, right? It's an opinion at a moment in time. I think it's a data point, but I also take it a little bit with a grain of salt. Like, I think we all know there's some magic quadrants out there too that you can be in. I think they're data points, but I think it should be taken as a data point and not as scripture. And you should look at the full picture.
I actually get, it's because we travel so much. Delta does give a call out to them. They do this one question when you call their customer service or their help. It goes, on a scale of 1 to 5, would you hire this person if you ran a call center? Done. So it took me 2 seconds to answer it. I'm giving my point in time answer, and it's piece of cake. I think every procurement group, at the end of every contract, at the end of every opportunity to interact with the internal customer and the supplier, by the way. So if you ran a procurement department, would you, give them a 0 to a 5 score? And I tell you, you'll get real feedback real fast if people are not happy with your results. And
of course, so it's like Glassdoor. When you go on Glassdoor and look up a company, people love to post their negative reviews of companies. You don't see as many positive reviews on there.
Yeah. But this is what I find is that giving a person a 5, and of course a Net Promoter, they don't count the 2, 3s, and 4s.
Exactly.
How many 5s are you getting?
Yeah.
And so people have to be very positive about you to give a 5, and then you get a better understanding of it. Are we doing a good job? But now, what are you doing differently if you get a bunch of 2, 3s, and 4s? Are you changing out the team? And I go back to, I think the skill sets, and now with AI coming in to do a whole nother layer of work, our skill set, our hiring of our people and the training of our people has to be constant and improving. And as I always said, I hire people much smarter than me, which is a very low bar. But the idea is to get up there because it's those best talented people that are going to make a difference. And as a leader, our goal is to set up the environment that people can excel. And that includes the right technology, the right AI usage, and the right goals that support their efforts.
But I think it's interesting, that dilemma, right? Because you have some of these guys, and we've all seen the archetypes of individuals where you have this curmudgeon who basically gets great results. Like he can beat the supplier within an inch of their life and get a great savings, but he leaves a field of dead soldiers behind him, right? Stakeholders and suppliers alike. And maybe that's okay, maybe it's not okay, but it sure would be nice to get those data points, so at least you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of what I was thinking about for the Net Promoter Score. And I think, Focal Point has the ability to do Net Promoter Score surveys, but very few folks take advantage of it because it is controversial. And, it is just an interesting data point.
Yep.
Anything else you want to mention about building relationships before we sort of move on to the wrap up?
Yeah, last point for me is I always look at it long term. Let's say we beat the supplier to its death. For the next 18 months, we have to deal with a very emotionally broken supplier. And they'll take it out on us 10 ways till Sunday. We could win a negotiation and absolutely lose the contractual value proposition we're trying to make. So my point of view is everything we do is got to have a long-term view, and a short-term goes away in the first storm.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think building supplier relationships is just as important as stakeholder. If you beat them over and over again, when you have to deliver bad news, like, oh, by the way, we're moving to net 90 payment terms, they're going to be less apt to play ball with you. If you have a healthier relationship and do healthy negotiation, then it only benefits you down the road. So short-term savings is one thing, but long-term health of a relationship is much better.
Very, very true. All right, Maya, next slide, please. So we didn't talk at all about tools today and processes and so on, right? And one of the things that I think we tend to underestimate, and maybe I'll get you feedback on this too, right, is the whole idea of making the right way the easy way. And having the right tools to facilitate that process is paramount to make that happen, right? So if you're asking folks to, be part of the sourcing process, then you hand them off to legal and say good luck to you guys. I mean, it's one of the, certainly that's been done. It doesn't typically play well. So having the ability to have a solution or a set of solutions in place that makes the easy way the right way and vice versa, it certainly helps a lot. So what you want to make sure as you sort of endeavor on this journey is to make sure that the tech you have can facilitate the process from end to end, tying stakeholders, tying history of what has transpired before it shows up on your desk and what's going to happen afterwards. Helps a lot, right? And being able to quickly access the information, not just about the project, but also about the stakeholders in the project, the suppliers in the project, how long it's going to take, and so on and so forth, and give people updates along the way. So obviously, this is a focal point plug, but at the end of the day, guys, like this is important as you start thinking about this, because it can either be like Lord of the Rings, where it's arduous journey, we have to fight for every step along the way, and it becomes sort of hard to drop the ring into the fire of Mordor. Or it can be the Lord of the Dance, where everything is coordinated and everything looks good. And, probably maybe a cheesy way of saying it, but it really helps a lot, right? So, Roy, Michelle, you guys want to chime in about this?
Yeah, I would say I've done tons of surveys of stakeholders, as I'm starting out in roles throughout my career. And the number one complaint that I hear is lack of transparency on what's the status? Who's it with? Where's it at? How much longer am I going to wait? And I think your tool does a great job of providing that transparency in a very clear way. And it's like it's low hanging fruit. It's an immediate solve and an immediate efficiency that you bring to your organization when you can say, it's all right here. You can see exactly where it's at now and how many more steps are left in the process.
Yeah. And I like the idea of when you have your QBRs with your internal customers, that you actually have the data that says, well, we've done 72 contracts with you and your team. We've provided this type of innovation to your structure. We've improved your relationship with legal. And they're like, I didn't even know you had a relationship with legal. But we supported your IT development. Oh, by the way, because this supplier already does this IT work, we actually saved you a significant amount of IT time. And you have all those, but you have to tie it back. That means your internal team has to realize that you're presenting their results through this tool set. No entry into the tool set, no results, no bonus. And it's got to be very clear that says, hey, we're using this as how we're going to measure our value to our internal customer. And I think that is a part of that whole marketing gig we were talking about earlier. Is like, we've got to tell people without big drums, but we have to tell people and show them, we're adding value across a wide spectrum of activity, and here's the data to prove it. People start saying, wow, how can we use you more? And then you're on the right conversation path.
Fantastic. Well, Roy and Michelle, thanks a lot for spending half an hour with me here. Always a pleasure. I really enjoy the conversation. Folks on the line, there are two QR codes on your screen. The one on your left is a guide to how to develop good strategic procurement relationships. And the one on the right is the QR code to register for the next session. And it's going to be hard to contain Roy for this one because it's all about AI-powered sourcing. So, and we're going to nerd out a little bit about how we can use context and context data to help form a strategy. So please join us for that. Everybody on the line, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, have a fantastic rest of your Friday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.